All right. So again, my name is Jovi Kovacsi-Mile. I'm here today to talk about my project called North Point that I've written along with my good friend John Tatakus, who is not here today because he was feeling sick. I guess the best way to preface this story is that we originally came up with this in 2010, and it didn't go anywhere. We didn't shoot any of it, didn't submit it anywhere, and then it sat for about 6-7 years. And then I discovered it again on my hard drive one day, and I reached out to him. I was like, "Do you remember this story?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then with that break in time, I think definitely helped to kind of refine my writing style. I mentioned earlier that I work in mental health, and in mental health, I learned scientific writing, which, because in school, sort of, I was always very good at creative writing, but now the opposite. And scientific writing helps you condense everything down into nice, concise pieces. And then the creative writing side is like, okay, where do you add to that? Where do you give it more value, or where do you, when you're stressing certain points in a story that you want your reader to remember. And that's where creative writing, I think, helps me with that. And from there, I was able just to add more detail and flesh out the world more in a way that you just don't have to with screenwriting. And we have a whole narrative timeline now for it. We know when it takes place. It was during that time I realized, like, and I'll talk about more when I share the first couple pages, but it's a young adult street story about gangs mainly in like a unspecified mid-Atlantic state. And as we were working more, I started to realize, like, oh man, this timeline fits well. Like, this is an alternate version of America where 9/11 never happened. And that ends up becoming kind of a minor plot point in the books, but it's sort of, I mean, the long thing is, like, something bad would happen regardless. Like, it wasn't 9/11, it would just be something else. And then that's what the books are going towards. So we had the 3 screenplays that fit nicely as a trilogy, and then when working on the books, we realized to have the proper setup and payoff, it needed 2 bookends on each side. So 2 intro books and 2 outro books to give 7 in total. And that's where we are now. I'm currently working on the manuscript for the first book. And then the 2 screenplays we have currently written are actually the 3rd and 4th book in the series. And then we're still working out about screenplays, because I do use screenplays as my template, as my plot outlines, even for books. Any questions, comments, anything worth clarifying? I guess I'll go through the story. Okay, then was gonna go through the first 2 scenes, first 4 pages or so, to kind of give an idea of what this project is about.
They do readings all the time, so it actually would help us get the flow of it if you had them read it.
Okay, yeah, we can totally do that.
Assign, actors to the parts, that would be good, and then you could just listen. Is that
Okay.
good for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anyone want to volunteer for that? I'll read the descriptions and narrations.
Okay.
I think that'd probably be
Do
best.
that.
But does anyone have any interest in reading actual lines? Sure. All right. All right, so interior parking garage night. Fade in. Mello O'Donnell, 32, and his henchmen stand over someone. A man screams to the sound of blunt trauma. Mello watches his henchman beat Hayes, 40. Ken Lowry, 31, hands Mello a wallet. Mello opens it and pulls out a family photo.
That's enough.
Mello's henchman stops beating Hayes. Mello kneels down and grabs him by the face.
No. Where's Lou White?
I don't know who you're talking about.
Where's Lou?
I don't know anyone named Lou.
Mello sighs.
And
One of Mello's henchmen grabs Hayes and places his hand on a metal barrel. Mello stands up and draws a knife.
you know Lou, and you know where he is. Tell me, and I'll let you go.
Fuck you.
Mello stabs Hayes in the hand. Hayes screams in pain.
Enough of your bullshit. You help lock up his competition?
Mhm.
God, I guess.
Mello taunts Hayes with a photograph.
The next thing you say determines what happens to your wife and kid.
Please, don't.
And tell me where he is.
I don't know where he is, honestly. But I know someone who does.
Who?
Hayes pauses. Mello twists the knife in his hand. Hayes screams again.
Okay. There's a guy that launders for him.
Name?
Lester. People call him Les. That's all I know, man. That's all I know.
Mello pulls the knife out and wipes it clean.
You know what to do.
What the fuck? I thought you said
I lied. And as for your family,
you fucking bastard.
Mello smiles and walks away. Gunshots echo through the parking garage. Interior, airport, day. Seth Ramirez, 21, stands in front of a baggage carousel. He looks over his shoulder and observes the people around him. Luggages appear and Seth grabs a bag from the conveyor belt. Seth exits the terminal and walks towards the entrance. He looks ahead and sees Driston Scott, 17. I'll do Driston's line because I'll talk about it later, but Seth and Driston are based off of John and I, the two things. So, Seth, my dude.
What's up, Tristan?
The friends dab each other and exit the airport. Interior, car, day. Driston drives through the city. Seth adjusts his passenger seat to lean back. How was the flight?
Shit, you're sure they're not looking for me?
Yeah, they stopped coming by a while ago. I haven't moved us to a new house. Also, you remember that contact who sold $20K for that car I wanted?
Lil White?
Uh-huh. He's bad, but I'm not sure who he's dealing with yet. There's something else, too.
What?
Mello.
O'Donnell?
O'Donnell. Yeah, he's a new boss over there.
Are we still working with them?
Nah, but he's got a kill streak going. I don't know what his problem is. Just watch out for all of them right now.
Man, fuck the O'Donnells.
We'll be good as long as you don't go starting shit. Not trying to have another war out here.
I know you're not trying to blame me for that when you were the one who...
Yo, that's not what I said. You didn't let me finish. What I was trying to say before you interrupted me
So
was...
you gotta think about it?
Yeah, I'm bullshitting. But seriously, things are better than they were a couple months ago. And now that you're back, we'll be eating bitches up. 2004, son! Driston lets go of the steering wheel and throws up mock gang signs. The car swerves. Seth grabs Driston's arm and pulls it back down.
Boy, put your hands on the wheel.
Seth and Driston laugh. Driston steadies the car and then stops at a traffic light. A disheveled man crosses the street. He wears a trench coat and carries a paper bag.
Damn, and I thought I had a problem.
Seth and Driston laugh again. The light turns green and Driston drives through the intersection. The disheveled man enters a coffee shop. And let's stop there. So the things that I break down or what I think goes into like the crafting of the story, or so kind of establishing that first scene again is the scene that John came to me with. I like the fact that it was in medias res. You don't know what's going on, and really the whole story, this kind of uses that. It's fast-moving action. Characters are making lots of references to past interactions they've had with each other. There's a lot of implications of like, there's a lot of shared history, stuff went on, but we don't have time to actually sit there and question it. We have to accept what our protagonists are saying, and because the plot kind of moves constantly. But establishing our villain early on, you know, he's obviously very scary, he's very violent, he's kidnapped someone who works with law enforcement, this person is scared of them, they're not trying to threaten or leverage their position, they're just begging for their life. And you know, Mello obviously does not worry about consequences for his action, he's out for the specific person, he's cruel, he's a liar, he's not trustworthy, seems not to have much of a moral compass. And again, this was made to do, because it is a street story. So, you know, our main characters are in a gang, they're, you know, criminals. So how do we make the audience identify with them early on? Well, we're going to introduce them immediately after that dark, harrowing, scary scene. Who is that? Well, these are just two kids, 17 and 21, comparing to this man in his early 30s who's just brutally killing people in public. And you see like, oh man, these are two kids. They're not being serious. You know, trying to put in the jokes in the beginning. Again, this was something like when he says 2004 son and throws up the mock gang signs, that was when we started working on the novelizations and we had the timeline. I'm like, oh, this is America where 9/11 didn't happen. So we know what year this is. Because the first book will start, part of that prequel development, it starts in 2001 and it'll be references like 9/11 doesn't happen. And then, so by this point, it's been 3 years, it's 2004. And it's like, so how do we sneak that in? Like, you know, they're not watching TV, there's not a news report. Like, how do you kind of make that sound natural? Because it's an info dump scene, the second one. The first one was just your intro, kind of action, try and grab people's attention and go from there. So now we need our information fed to us a little bit, but in a not boring way. So let's do it with a joke, as we're introducing one of our protagonists, trying to humanize them, and then throwing in like, okay, this is what year it is, without it being a little bit too in your face. And then rule of threes with, you know, first he, you know, the teenager kid, the 17-year-old, tries to blame his friend for something that happened when obviously he has been gone for some time. Then he can't think of an answer, so he just kind of hand waves it away, and then he does, you know, says a 2004 son and all that. and then, swerves the car. So, rule of threes, three jokes really close together. And then finally how the scene ends is this disheveled man is crossing the street and he enters a coffee shop. Our main character protagonists keep driving and we're staying with this disheveled man all of a sudden, which kind of builds off the first two scenes. This is Lou White, basically. And we do that twice more in the screenplay. I really like doing that, using like motion to carry you to the next scene, so it's not just hard stop, beginning of a next scene. It's character runs it, there's another one, the character walks past the bus station and then it follows a bus that comes into the station and a different character gets off, but this using motion to move the story along narratively, so it's not just, okay, chapter end, page end, start there. Yeah, I think I have any thoughts, comments, anything anyone had for those first two? And so page 5. So this is all doing this within the first 5 minutes of our story. So I'm establishing that intro, getting our protagonists and contrasting them to our villain to make the audience naturally start to identify with them. Yeah, any thoughts, questions, anything from anyone? Yeah.
I was just gonna ask if you can like spoil the story for us and like tell us what happens.
Yeah, sure, I can do it without the major plot points. So, so yeah, our two main protagonists, Seth and Driston, 17 and 21, they're just two guys. They like to party. They do the whole gang thing, but it's not really, it's very non-committal. It's just about partying and having fun, living free from consequences, not living free from society. And then, as it's implied, they had some kind of history with the O'Donnells, this Godfather-esque style crime family, and there's two other gangs in the city that kind of control most of it. So Seth and Driston get involved in this power struggle in the city. Driston in particular is just this agent of chaos. He does not mean to necessarily, but this destruction follows him where he goes, and it sweeps up everyone in it. But they get caught up in this power struggle between the three gangs, and they end up in a final confrontation with Mello. But at the same time, it is still a story about these two kids, these friends. Also in this story, it shows a friendship fracturing. Just in that first scene, they kind of, Driston's blaming Seth for whatever happened previously, and then he's like, I know you're not trying to say that was my fault. And as the story goes on, you realize they are really falling apart. That couple months, 6-month period they spent apart, a lot happened in that time, and Seth doesn't quite recognize the kid he came back to. Was that a good synopsis at all, or? Okay, yeah.
Do you think you could explain more about there's no 9/11?
Sure, yeah, okay, so that really goes back to the first book that I'm working on. That story starts in 2001, when the older of the two protagonists, Seth, turns 18, he leaves. His friend Driston, who has just turned 14, runs away with him because that's sort of his found father, his brother figure. It's the only person he has after his parents died. And he ends up in the same group home. They leave shortly after, and then they're just at a friend's house while Seth is just trying to find a job, get a phone, kind of get his bearings together. And then they're just at his friend's apartment, and a news report comes on TV that a terrorist attack on the Twin Towers was thwarted by a joint operation between the CIA and FBI, and it interviews the FBI agent who took them down, and she becomes a very important character in it'll be the fourth book. But the outcome of North Point Station kind of puts North Point on the FBI's radar into what is going on here, the amount of police killings, the amount of gang activity. Something's up here. She's brought there. She has this very strong sense of justice, this personal driven. I mean, she's the person who thwarted 9/11, so she has this drive that she, cannot allow stuff like this to keep going, and then it eventually leads to another awful domestic terrorist event.
If you base the two protagonists off of yourself and your co-writer, how do you find ways to differentiate your main characters?
That's a good question. John and I are pretty. There's a lot of overlap. We have personality traits and things in common. We're both doing music and stuff, but we grew up from very different backgrounds. He grew up from New York. I grew up here, but we both have European fathers. Again, the music connection. We have these kind of weird connections. We're 4 years apart in age, the same way as these characters, and we split that up. That is one thing to kind of make characters distinguished or distinct. Taking just one personality trait of ours and giving it to them, and then taking a different personality trait of yours and giving it to a different character, so you don't end up with this one really well-rounded character that has like everything you, and then this other one is very one-dimensional by comparison. Mhm.
Yeah, I was gonna say, working in mental health, how has that informed the writing?
Yeah, I'd say pretty much. Another big thing is like kind of themes throughout this is kind of gray morality, moral grayness versus survival. Addiction is a major thing throughout all the stories, and the reasons with that. Yeah, I put a lot of that from experiences I've had working in different places in mental health. Like the substance abuse one is big. There's a rehab scene in a later story. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Sorry, I'm prone to rambling, so. Mhm.
Yes. In this class recently, we had a discussion about what the morals are of writing a story based off of somebody you know. And so you mentioned that your experience in the mental health
Mhm.
world has given you many stories.
Mhm.
What are your opinions on using stories that you've heard for like public knowledge like this?
Mhm.
If you're not exposing who that person is, do you think, what are your opinions on that?
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't really think about it like that, kind of, with like the mental health, like those kind of crazy stories from like group homes and stuff, or, people I've worked with. I don't know, if it was like something really traumatic, I probably wouldn't. But I don't feel like I'm crossing any lines. I haven't really approached him like, hey, is it cool if I, include that in a story? Those are conversations like I had years ago with people before I ever thought to do that. And I've also had like a lot of crazy experiences. Probably the craziest were like working as a mental health tech on a substance abuse unit and just fighting with people for like 12-hour shifts at a time. And it was just like, I don't know, I feel like I put in my time and I made my sacrifice, so I think I can do it. But yeah, I would definitely do it with respect though to that person, and not not to ridicule or make light of necessarily anything serious. I think is the best way I could say that. But that's a really good point, though. I hadn't considered that.
I was gonna ask, with this multimedia project, what are you most excited in fleshing out with it?
It's the first and last book 1 and book 7, honestly, because book 1 is that story that takes the most from my mental health experiences in mental health, like with the group home and kids living on the street and doing stuff, and then also taking things from John and I's own lives as teenagers and little things and putting that in there. And it just feels the whole thing kind of became therapeutic, especially when it added the whole like this is an alternate universe where 9/11 didn't happen, and it's kind of making sense of the world and how can things be so messed up, and I don't know, kind of coming up for like a reason why the world is messed up. But yeah, that first book is kind of like the one doing that, and it's such a simple story about just 2 kids. Also, when we got the idea to make it a YA series, we aged the characters down in the screenplays, the original a little bit older. And then that 7th book is my favorite character story trope is like the detective and killer, just catch the killer story. And then the story, it will all taper down to Seth and the character from the FBI. And that's just my favorite kind of type of story, and so doing that for the last one is kind of like the reward if I'm fortunate enough to get to that far in the series, and the last one's just going to be this to catch a killer. Mm-hmm.
What was your co-writing process like?
So my background came, strong film background, technical understanding, all of that. I was really into editing personally. And then my friend John, and co-writer John, is an actor and musician. We met doing music initially. So he comes from that non-traditional background. But so our co-writing thing is usually either starting from somewhere and we kind of throw around ideas and it goes from there, or maybe I will have something actually written, whether it's an outline or the actual dialogue and stuff, and come to him and we'll break it down. I'm really good at writing in general. I can write large things. I could do 9-page papers the night before they were due in college. So I do most of the writing. But he helps me sort through a lot of the bad ideas. Mm-hmm.
What kind of music do you make?
I play instrumental music, as does John. I do mainly indie rock, a little bit of other stuff, post-rock, indie pop. Yeah, it's called Anagram Noise, if anyone would like to check it out. But yeah, and then, I definitely hope to compose soundtracks potentially for something like this one day, and that's an idea we're working for, kind of what are character themes or ideas for that, and then it helps with maybe creating videos or something, and you have material to add to it. But yeah, this whole North Point project is a bit of a multimedia thing because of our natural interest of music, and too, I like graphic design too, editing, video editing, and yeah, and we are trying to kind of figure out how can we blend all of our different interests and things into it. Like, you kind of use the stories to promote the music, use the music to promote the stories.
I guess with the story as a whole, is there like one kind of demographic in mind that you guys see this kind of being aimed towards?
So demographic, I mean, for like YA, your audience is 2 years less and more than your protagonists. So having our story in where that first book starts, the characters are 14 and 17, so that really covers like 12 to 20. 1920. So pretty wide. I mean, it's a coming of age story. It's, two protagonists are both males. So, I mean, most likely it's going to be, that teenage, mid-20-year-old male demographic. There is a lot of diversity in the story. I mean, it takes place in a mid-Atlantic city, and then they are all specifically separated by ethnicity. And then it wasn't necessarily to hit like a diversity quota or anything. It worked for it being that diverse. But yeah, and that's something we've talked about more recently, like, okay, because that's something I guess a publisher or other things would be interested in. But yeah, so we're kind of going for that, especially for the books, going for preteen, teenage demographic. I would hope that it can appeal to, girls and female audiences almost as much as males.
Curious, have you worked out a way to pitch it to someone who knows nothing about it? Like if somebody says to you, what are you working on?
That's something else that we're working because yeah, for like screenwriting festivals, they ask for like a synopsis and stuff, so that kind of helped, like, okay, condense this down to like 3-4 paragraphs or something like that, and then a pitch is even shorter. So we're still currently working on that. I mean, this is the first time I have ever publicly talked or presented anything about this work. It's just been friends and random people here and there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's very much a learning and trial and error kind of thing. And I'm kind of hoping to use my experience of like pitching to record labels and A&R people and all the rejections from that to kind of help temper expectations and and have a good pitch and have kind of go in with something in mind and not just nothing. Like, listen to this song and hope you like it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck when you get this all done. If you could reach out to us.
I would absolutely love to do that. And hopefully John could attend too.